Hey guys, my name is RyanCentral and welcome to HitScan. We're going to go over the patch notes for 2.11 today, as well as talk about the big news when it comes to the economy changes for the guns, what that means, some of the trends and little minor stuff that people aren't talking about it that I think is going to have a pretty big impact overall on the game, and certainly just how it'll work in the future, and a lot of speculation on that as well with some really good points and ideas. But let's start with the patch notes, and we can sum this up very quickly because there isn't many. This is a balance patch that has no agent or balance changes in it at all. It was kind of expected, but what is in there is that replication's back in the other game mode rotation, I guess you can call it. They fixed frame rate a little bit, they fixed fonts for various regional languages to improve readability. When it comes to important stuff or stuff that, you guys are probably excited for, it isn't in this patch, but that's expected. The devs have said that most of the balance changes that they've spoken about, which comes to Yoru, Astra, Breach, Sky, and maybe Viper, will be coming in patch 3.0, which is at the start of episode 3, which is in 2 weeks' time. This is the calm before the storm. This is a patch that really, it doesn't matter that there's not much in here because we're going to be getting a lot in 2 weeks' time. Not only with all of these balance changes like I mentioned, although they might be a little bit later according to the devs, depends on how well they do. We have a new agent, we possibly have a new Clash game mode coming in then, and probably a lot more content. So be sure to like and subscribe for all of the content. I had to throw that in somewhere. It's a YouTuber, it's in my bones. So that's the patch notes. We can tie a bow in that because there's really not that much else to highlight in it overall. So let's talk about these weapon price changes, the impact of them, and some important things to note, not only when it comes to a bit of a PSA, but also trends and important stuff that it's going to have when it comes to impact of the game. If you haven't seen these before, where did they come from? Well, Diogote did that video yesterday going over the new Origin skin set with the devs. It's on the dev build, they get to show it earlier, and the devs opened up the buy menu showing price changes to all of the guns that you're seeing on screen. By the way, if you want to see the Origin skin set, we have a video which you can check out in the description and probably in the card somewhere if I can work that out. So these are the price changes. I think individually they're pretty interesting looking at stuff like the Frenzy and the Op, but there's some trends, I suppose, with the guns that I wanted to highlight. But first, this is on the dev build. This is susceptible to change. This isn't set in stone. And first and foremost, we don't know if these changes are coming at all. The devs like to test and try stuff out to see what it's like. But also, we don't know if it's coming anytime soon. A lot of people assume that we'd get it today. Maybe we'll get it for episode 3. That seems very likely, but we just don't know. So this is still open to interpretation, into change, and therefore, let's not panic about it so far. And the main thing overall is we just know the price changes. We don't know if there's any other changes to the guns themselves, which is really weird to see people panic about the Frenzy's price change when we don't know anything else about what the Frenzy acts and looks like now. We know what it looks like, but you get my point. So for the Frenzy, the fire rate might be worse. The bullets per pellet might be a lot worse. The range of it might have been nerfed drastically to make sure it's a strong close-up weapon and nothing else at that point. We just do not know at this point. We only got a finite bit of information. But another thing that's important is look at the guns that were nerfed. You can separate them into their own categories. The first 4, Frenzy, Stinger, Bucky, Judge, the economy guns, I suppose you could call it that, and there's been a big problem with them in the past, certainly the Judge as well, which gets a lot of complaints. The Bulldog, Guardian, the worst rifles, the Marshall Operator, the sniper rifles, and then the Ares is on its own as the big LMG, which probably doesn't just mesh well with the Odin. The Odin's just a better weapon, it's not too much more expensive, so you're always going to go with the Odin over the Ares, unless it's like a round 2 buy and you just want to ruin some walls somewhere. But a Frenzy, Stinger, Bucky, and Judge, I think it's important to talk about those guns in particular, because there's one area of the game that we know that we're getting changes for, at least from what the devs have said, that ties in nicely to those guns. Running and gunning.
We're still looking at like running and shooting stuff.
Oh yeah.
It's still on our mind. I think that in most, there's like a couple of different angles that we're trying to tackle with it. I think one of them is something that we're looking to hopefully get out in the next patch or two, is the hope. It's probably a small change, so I don't want to get anyone's hopes up too much, but it should impact a couple of scenarios where people feel like they're being, run shot more often than they should be.
The devs have said they want to take a second pass at the whole running while shooting and the accuracy that you have. And bear in mind, the first pass, the first time that they changed it, it was only to the rifles. It was only to the Vandal, the Phantom, and I think the Bulldog and Guardian as well. I need to double check that. But it was for the main guns, and specifically, it didn't impact the SMGs or the pistols. So maybe the Frenzy and the Stinger and the Bucky had their price buffed by it being reduced, because running and gunning was fixed for these guns, and therefore running and gunning isn't really possible with a Frenzy anymore. So maybe that's a give and take situation, we just don't know. But I think considering we're looking at those 4 guns in this list, I would have to assume that running and gunning has had another fix and change to it, and to make sure that these guns aren't completely trash tier because of those changes, they've decreased the price to make up for it. That's my lead-in expectation going into this. For the Marshal and Operator, I also think that's another interesting one. The Marshal's pretty good, so 950 is probably maybe a step overboard. But also the Operator, I've been asking for this for quite some time. I think the 4,500 was way too expensive, way too cheap even. Some people would argue that it's way too expensive, maybe Wardell. But yeah, bringing it up to 5,000 just took it out of the game too much, certainly at the competitive level where you want to see it a little bit more. But also, look at the agents that we've had added into the game since the Operator had its price increased. Sky, Yoru, Astra. So many agents have great utility to flash or use util to knock an Operator off an angle. There's more ways to fight an op in the game in comparison to before, where it was only really a breach that could do that consistently. Now we have all agents, and some abilities are much stronger now than they used to be. So I think that bringing the Operator down, but not down to where it used to be before, is more than fine. I would have liked to have seen it at 4,750 just to get it nice and clean right in the middle, but 4,700 is really nice. I'm super happy with that, but I'll probably regret saying that when I just get domed in ranked playing up against some not even great Operator play, just somebody that's holding an angle and nobody can clear it. I can just feel it. The Bulldog and Guardian, I feel that it's just a constant war with the devs to make sure that these guns get some play time. I just don't see it with the Guardian ever, really, at this point. And then the Ares, like I mentioned before, comparison to the Odin, why would you ever pick it up? So making it cheaper makes a lot of sense. But I need to highlight, this is open to change. We might not get this soon, and we don't know what other changes have come with these guns. So let's not panic too much. But there is one more thing that I think is super important to highlight with these price changes that is just going to not break the economy, but completely revamp it. The game is going to dramatically change because we're getting 50 currency changes now, which is something we've never had before. Now, that might seem like a bit of an overstep, like, haven't we had that before? The gun changes and abilities are always in 100 currencies, 100, 200, 300, 400, so on and so forth. So having the 50 changes from the Frenzy being 450 now, the Stinger being 950, it's pretty interesting because look at the other stuff that you can buy with currency. Abilities. And I would assume that considering we're seeing these 50 deviations of currency for the guns, we would also see it for some abilities. Buffing some strong ones that are maybe a bit expensive, maybe like a Sage Wall or an Omen Paranoia. There's really expensive abilities. You can bring them down 50. Paranoia now costing 350 is quite nice. 300 for Paranoia, way too cheap. 400 for me as an Omen player, way too expensive. So 350, I like that. I think that's a really nice in the middle compromise, and I would hope to see something for Sage. But also you look at the abilities that are way too strong, way too oppressive in this game. You're looking at Shock Darts, Snake Bites, all of that post-plant utility that you can yeet from 500 yards away. You're playing on Ascent, you're throwing post-plant utility onto Bind and still stalling it. Having those abilities be just a touch more expensive is going to just make it harder to keep that economy in your favor. So Snake Bite, Shock Dart, Nano Swarm maybe. Isn't Nano Swarm 200? In any case, those 100 credit abilities that are super strong and just way too spammy in a post plant, I could see them being upped by 50 because upping them by 100 would be way too much. The freedom that the devs have given themselves now to do these 50 deviations is really good. And I think because of that, we're going to see some massive economy changes overall in this game. Whether we see that in episode 3, don't know. Whether we see it at all, don't know. But this is a pretty interesting look at what the devs are trying to do economy wise. So maybe we sit down with Nick Wu or Kane or whoever wants to sit down with us at that point to talk about the economy changes, because it might not seem that exciting or shiny. It's not an agent buff on Earth, but this changes everything about Valorant. I'm not going to put that in the thumbnail. I'm not crazy like that, but it's still an important thing to highlight overall. And so because of this and because of the patch, a lot of people would be looking at this and seeing, is this going to be in this patch today? The answer for that is no, because there's not much at all, but it's all coming, well, fingers crossed, all come in next 2 weeks with episode 3. So that'll do it for the patch notes and also talking about the weapon price changes. I really like the looks of this and I hope it goes ahead, but I think the devs have even said publicly that it's on the dev build. We don't know if we're putting this through. So the fact that some of them have said that makes me assume that we're not going to be seeing this, at least in the next couple of patches. We'll have to see. Let me know what you think of this and what you're excited to see in episode 3, and I'll see you in the next one. It's boiling here, so I'm going to finish up. Thanks for watching. Take care. I'll see you then.